Delicious, healthy superfood. Nuts have it all.
It's a multi-billion market.
But who earns and who pays a high price?
The acid eats away at our hands.
Nutritious and sustainable? We're looking for the super nut. Estella Schweitzer loves nuts more than anything. The food blogger from Freiburg has dedicated an entire cookbook to these nutty favorites.
Delicious.
Estella's kitchen would be unthinkable without Cashews Co. On the menu today, a cashew risotto.
The image of nuts has completely changed in the last 5 to 8 years. Until then, nuts were always seen as fattening, and people avoided them. They had a really bad reputation. And nowadays, they're known as slimming agents because nuts bring various factors with them, due to the fact of how they are structured and what they do in our body. And we also know today that not all calories from the fat structure of the nut can be absorbed by the body because it has such a complex structure.
Strictly speaking, cashew nuts are seeds. The cashews are added to the pan for the salad topping. They are seasoned with curry and cumin to give them a special flavor. With a fat content of only around 40%, cashews are rather low in fat compared to other nuts. But they are rich in minerals such as phosphorus and magnesium, which are important for cells, bones and muscles. Cashews are all-rounders in the kitchen. Estella appreciates their versatility. Cashew butter, for example, is the creamy base for her risotto.
It is very mild and relatively neutral in taste. It also has a very aromatic, delicately spicy flavor when roasted, and the cashew has a lot of lecithin and is therefore a wonderful emulsifier, especially as cashew puree, to thicken creams or soups and to make cream.
This is why cashews have firmly established themselves as a milk substitute, especially in plant-based cuisine. Cashews can also be used to make a Parmesan alternative. Simply chop up the baked cashews. And yet, as tasty as they are, Estella also knows the downsides of the nuts. Because almost all of them come from abroad. China has now replaced the USA as the largest producer of walnuts. More than 60% of hazelnuts come from Turkey. The Amazon countries supply Brazil nuts. Cashews grow mainly in West Africa. With almost 838,000 tons, Côte d'Ivoire is currently the largest producer. However, 90% of cashews take a long detour via Vietnam or India for further processing before they end up in our supermarkets. Some cashew nuts have traveled 23,000 nautical miles then. Friedel Hütz-Adams is an economic expert at the Bonn-based Südwind Institute, which campaigns for economic, social and ecological justice. He has been observing the nut market for a long time.
Globally, the nut market is a booming market that generates billions a year. What's more, nuts also enhance many other products. Hazelnut chocolate or muesli with walnuts and cashews in it achieves different prices than if I only have cereals in it. It's a multi-billion market.
The market for nuts and seeds is currently estimated at almost $1.4 trillion. The main beneficiaries are trade and industry. The losers are the people in the countries of origin, also because of the risks, such as with cashews.
To open them, to process them, I actually need protective equipment, gloves, aprons and so on. But that's often not the case. You can easily find videos on YouTube that show what the hands of people, mostly women, look like in the factories who work with cashews without protection.
We want to see for ourselves and are traveling to Southeast Asia. Vietnam is the largest exporter of processed cashews. The cashew center Bon Pho is located in the southeast. Many raw cashews come here from abroad for processing, but some also grow here in this country. The actual cashew kernel hangs from the lower end of the so-called cashew apple. When the fruits are ripe, they fall to the ground and the kernel can be harvested. Harvesting conditions are obviously a sensitive issue. Our filming is closely monitored by the authorities. We are photographed and filmed. Unrestricted reporting is hardly possible. Han Tan is the third generation to grow cashews on 250 hectares. She needs a lot of helpers to harvest from February to June.
So they are living nearby, and when the season comes in, we call them for work to pick up, and at the end of the day, they collect the nut, and we weigh how many kilos they can collect it.
Because you pay per kilo, employees scour the area every day during the harvest season. They collect around 20 kilos a day, for which they are paid 10 to 14 euros. At 35 degrees Celsius, the workers separate the kernel directly from the cashew apple, a waste product. The farm doesn't offer fixed contracts or social benefits. What is striking is that there are many children and young people on the plantation. However, the farm owner assures us that there is no child labor.
Because if they stay at home, they are alone, so not safe. So they follow the parents, come to the garden, and they just play in. I'm not sure, maybe they are still too young to go to school, so they follow the parents. But for the older, when they are 6 years old, they go to school.
We have massive social problems in the cultivation of cashews, where working conditions are even worse, where even more children work, where families earn even less, which is the cause of child labor.
However, there are no children working with us during our shoot. Next door, further processing. Kilos of nuts are roasted in the ovens. A back-breaking job. Removing the shells is almost exclusively a women's job. 20 female employees usually crack the nuts by hand. The kernels are very delicate.
And many workers, they adjust the machine by their hand. For the big nut, they will break half. For the small nut, they break lightly. So the rotten rate is less. We prefer using the manual breaking so we can reduce the rotten rate.
When cracking, the workers come into contact with the toxic shell oil, cardol. Direct skin contact can lead to severe burns. At least the women here wear gloves.
Because the cashew oil is very harmful, and it can affect your skin, the worker's skin, so they need to wear the plastic glove to prevent the cashew oil, to prevent from the hot sting. It's not dangerous, but we need to take care of our skin when we do cutting the cashew nut.
I'm not afraid of the oil. I've been working here for a very long time. But I know women who have problems with the oil because they're not careful.
But critics complain. In order to be able to work faster, workers often do without hand protection. Payment is based on weight. The women manage 25 kilos a day. It's often one of the few opportunities to earn money. The corrosive smell burns in our lungs. It is terribly hot, and the noise is almost unbearable. In another factory, we do hear that the oil is a problem.
It eats away at our hands. The acid eats away at our hands. The oil just splashes. Only if we wash it away directly is it no problem.
Long delivery routes, problematic local conditions. Cashew is not an easy case. Is there no better way? Just outside Hamburg, Farmer's Snack has been producing nuts for the German retail trade for almost 50 years. Managing Director Cornelia Ahrens sees only one way to achieve fair conditions.
You can only comply with these standards if you're on site, and if, like us, you tend to work with small and medium-sized companies and advise each other, then it's certainly possible to maintain these standards, but it takes time and effort to be on site.
Und natürlich auch die Mühe, vor Ort zu sein.
However, the nut boom is putting companies under pressure and creates dependencies. At the same time, extreme weather conditions and crop failures are making procurement from all over the world more difficult. Yet nuts also grow here. Take walnuts, for example. They are currently in the frying pan of cookbook author Estella Schweitzer. The candied walnuts are later added to the salad as a crunchy topping.
Walnuts are not quite as easy to use in the kitchen as almonds or cashews, for example, because they have a lot of bitter substances and tart flavours. But they have their own special areas of application. Firstly, in savoury dishes, where its strong flavour comes through very well, and in bakery, because the contrast between sweet and savoury works really well.
Walnuts have a high content of polyunsaturated fatty acids, essential for healthy cell walls and brain function. They also contain magnesium and lots of potassium, which supports the muscles and regulates blood pressure. The walnut, the superstar among nuts? At Estella, they are added to the mixture for a nut meatball. Although walnuts also grow in our climate zones, the produce in supermarkets usually comes from abroad, mainly from the USA and China.
The cultivation of walnuts abroad should not be viewed as critically as the cultivation of cashews. However, the trees often grow in plantations. That is certain monocultures, but otherwise the social yield and economic yield are not quite as serious.
Walnut trees have been growing here for centuries, not in plantations, however, but scattered across the countryside. There are also walnut trees in Sammenheim in northern Bavaria. There are 220 of them with just 350 inhabitants. The walnut has a long tradition here. Ernst Beisser is part of the local walnut initiative. He has set himself the task of preserving the local walnut.
If you look at the appreciation of the walnut in Germany, then you have to say that it's almost non-existent. There are certainly one or two garden owners who say, "I'll plant a walnut tree in my garden." But as a food crop, it doesn't really exist at the moment.
The rush in the nut house is great. The association buys walnuts, and garden owners in the region bring their harvest. In this way, the Sammenheimers are trying to build up small-scale marketing structures. The association pays €2 per kilo, provided the quality is right. Because the nuts have to be well dried.
Yeah, they are mostly good. The moisture is at the upper limit, but we accept that. And we're checking now. The pip comes out reasonably well. Every now and then there's a bad one, but it's simply a natural product. About 3 or 4% are not usable. The rest seems to be quite good.
4 tons are collected today. By the end of the season, the total will be just under 12 tons. The nuts are cracked, marketed directly or processed into oil and puree. The good harvest this year, another contribution to the preservation of the walnut trees.
And that's how it came about that we actually created utilization structures here, so the trees naturally retain their value if the nut is usable. Otherwise, you often only have the leaves, but no use for the fruit, and then you cut the tree down, and here it's exactly the opposite trend.
There's no large-scale walnut cultivation in Germany. That's why this nut is also imported on a large scale. Over 52,000 tons last year. It's simply cheaper. In Oettingen, Bavaria, they try anyway, with hazelnuts. Hazelnut trees cover 14 hectares here. Stefan Ott wanted to set up a plantation in the fall of 2022. Today, the trees have to be pruned to prevent crop failures the following year. Each hectare takes 100 hours of work.
There are 2 up there. They're 2 cramped here too. And maybe another one here. And the bottom one there, I think. Growing hazelnuts is a big challenge. It's a relatively new and unknown crop here in Germany. The harvest this year was relatively modest. We had very little rainfall. Many farmers have the problem that the plants are stressed due to the low rainfall. They have lost most of the nuts due to the drought, and then the tree is also more susceptible to disease.
Stefan Ott only harvested 1 ton this year. That's just an eighth of what would be possible. A huge financial loss for the hazelnut farmer, contrary to all expectations.
In my opinion, the hazelnut is a very good plant, especially in terms of climate change. It binds CO2, provides a lot of shade. The soil doesn't heat up as much as wheat or maize. And cultivation also requires little CO2, because you don't have to sow, plough or harvest with combine harvesters every year.
Short transportation routes are also good for the climate. What's more, hazelnuts are a valuable source of nutrients. Hazelnuts are rich in calcium. This ensures the stability of teeth and bones and is important for our body cells. In addition to potassium, hazelnuts are also rich in vitamin E, which protects our cells from free radicals. However, hazelnut cultivation in Germany is still a niche, not even noticeable in the statistics.
We would like to see more support from the scientific community, more attention and also more financial support, so that we can expand hazelnut cultivation and at some point be in a position to make a living from it.
Stefan Ott still buys nuts from other European countries and sells them in his online store. This is because domestic hazelnuts only play a minor role on the market. Yet the nuts have good growing conditions here. Carola Nitsch is an expert in hazelnut cultivation. She has been trying to establish it as a consultant for a long time, so far without much success.
You have to invest a certain amount of money in order to plant a system. And of course, you don't want to put it on the market until you can earn money with it. But then there is also further support, advice, and there are still big gaps. And the financial risk currently lies 100% with the farmers.
Uncertain harvests, high financial risks, and a lack of support. farmers feel left alone.
The call for politics is good, but hazelnut farmers also need to take bigger steps. Politicians are also waiting for farmers to take this step and professionalize this crop. Hazelnuts or nut cultivation in general, including walnuts and chestnuts.
Until then, most will continue to be imported. Over 75,000 tons of hazelnuts were imported in 2022. The majority are harvested by hand in Turkey on the steep slopes of the Black Sea coast. Working conditions are also criticized here.
During the harvest season, when a lot of helpers are needed, migrant workers are employed for the most part. And you can then observe this. You can find tent camps along the coast where families sometimes live in devastating conditions, often outside the villages without a toilet system and without a decent water supply. You can often see families harvesting on the slopes, including their children. So the problem of child labor is widespread.
Ferrero is a major consumer of Turkish hazelnuts. How does the company react to such criticism? The company refers to its code of conduct for suppliers and writes, "We monitor our hazelnut value chain and implement corrective action plans when deviations are identified. We train farmers in good agricultural and social practices to improve working conditions on plantations, prevent child labor, and provide children with educational opportunities. We tackle these challenges together with local partners." Not only the industry but also retailers are criticized for not being able to guarantee truly fair supply chains. We asked many of the big players in the industry, but only Kerstin Erber from DM was prepared to make a statement.
Of course, we try to be as close to the farmers as possible, but the cooperative system is not quite as well developed for nuts as it is for coffee or cocoa, for example. We have fewer opportunities to use fair trade labels and the like to make sure that we really have access to the small farmers. However, we try very hard to be on the ground through our partners and to audit there to make sure that what is written in the contracts is actually enforced.
There's obviously no such thing as 100% transparency. It's often not even possible to identify where the nuts come from and under what conditions they were grown. There is only a legal obligation to label walnuts, almonds and hazelnuts in their shells. This obligation does not apply to other types of nuts. And even processed nuts, chopped, sliced, shelled, do not have to be labeled. Some German manufacturers at least rely on voluntary indications of origin and seals.
The responsibility cannot lie with consumers. I actually want to be able to step up to the shelf and be sure that there is no child labor involved, that farmers at the beginning of the chain had a living wage, that they can pay their employees properly. I don't want to bear the responsibility for these abuses. I want those responsible in the companies to bear the responsibility.
Many varieties are popular. On average, every German eats more than 5 kilograms. Peanuts, almonds and hazelnuts are particularly popular. They are followed by cashews, walnuts and pistachios. So which ones can be nibbled without a guilty conscience? Stefanie Kapp is a scientist from the Netherlands. She and her colleagues examined 8 different nuts for various social, ecological and nutritional criteria.
We wanted to avoid an absolute ranking, but rather provide some general guidance about which nuts could be a greater share in nut consumption with fewer trade-offs, and which nuts have more risks associated with consumption. And then for the bottom ranked nuts, which are almonds, chestnuts, and cashews, we don't want to demonize these nuts or say avoid consumption, but rather raise awareness that there are some trade-offs associated with these nuts.
Cashews in particular score poorly due to the social risks. Hazelnuts are also criticized, but pose fewer risks in the supply chains. The walnut comes off best.
So we found that the overall best performing nut is the walnut, and walnuts performed better than average across most environmental, nutritional, and social criteria. And walnuts performed especially well on the nutritional dimension because walnuts have a very high ALA omega-3 fatty acid content, and this is a nutrient that is underconsumed globally, so it's especially important that walnuts provide this essential nutrient.
But what if it has to be cashew after all? For chef Estella Schweitzer, it should above all be fair and sustainable. That's why she's also working with a young startup in Freiburg. Today, it's all about new recipes.
My idea is how you can mix it quickly at home with 2 or 3 ingredients and then cook something with it.
Yes, the nice thing is that the nuts themselves are so different, and depending on the nut, completely new ways open up.
Amos Bucher wants to prove with his company that you can eat nuts without a guilty conscience if the conditions are right.
We don't optimize the supply chain for profitability, but for fairness, which for us means sustainability and transparency. Value creation starts with the nuts at the farmers, which means that we make sure that fair wages are paid, wages that people can live on.
Fair Food has founded its own cooperatives, for example in Nigeria and Burkina Faso. If the yields from these cooperatives are not sufficient, the company purchases nuts from external suppliers who offer fair goods. The nuts are processed at the company in Freiburg. A kilo of natural cashews costs just under 30 euros here. Over 70% of this goes to producers and growers abroad, says Fair Food. But the 100% sustainable nut remains wishful thinking.
For us, a fair supply chain is an ideal that we strive for, knowing that it can never be completely fair for everyone. There are always shifts, harvests fail, prices rise, and we always have to balance things out. But our aim is to be as fair as possible, and we have to look at this depending on the product, depending on the nut, depending on the country of origin, and shed light on different aspects. Of course, there is also a great deal of interest from the big players who sell nuts conventionally that this is not made an issue at all.
Today, Estella is wielding the wooden spoon for the staff. Of course, nuts are a must in the plant-based bolognese.
Dinner's ready.
The big run on nuts has consequences. The supernut doesn't exist. It remains consumption with an aftertaste.